Ever thought about how the church we know today started off like not as the grand cathedral you imagine, but more like a small neighborhood
Yeah,
club?
absolutely.
It's kind of a mind-blowing perspective.
Right. It's so surprising. When you hear church, you picture grandeur. But in the second century, they were more like everyday gatherings, kind of like your local trade guild, or even a neighborhood dinner party.
Exactly, and that's because the term ecclesia really just meant an assembly. Any group, really.
Mm,
Imagine it wasn't something brand new at all, but just one more association among the hundreds we found in the Roman world.
that's wild. So basically, early Christians were doing what a lot of other groups did, forming clubs, organizing meetings over meals or in rented spaces.
Yeah, it's like they were following the same blueprint as bakers' guilds, shipbuilders' clubs, and those cult groups for Isis or Dionysus. They too had
Right.
rules, dues, feasts, you name it.
It really flips the script, doesn't it? Instead of being this entirely set apart, mystical, holy institution, they were practically using the same cultural patterns.
Absolutely. Picture this: a regular dinner party with, say, 20 to 40 folks, almost like a big family gathering. That's how these early groups held their meetings, in homes or rented dining halls, not in majestic basilicas as we often envision.
Right, and that scale, it really underscores how personal and intimate these gatherings were. No massive congregations, just small clusters of believers.
Yeah, and what's even more interesting is how the roles within these gatherings were so similar to other Roman associations. A deacon, for example, wasn't some high-ranking
Yep,
spiritual figure. They were like practically the service crew ensuring everything ran smoothly.
exactly like the person who pours the wine, handles the bread, collects contributions. It really demystifies the role, doesn't it?
Right on. And elders, or presbyteros, were just, the older ones providing guidance, sort of like the respected seniors in any community who help resolve disputes. Nothing that fancy, really.
Yeah, but then there's the bishop, the episcopos. Initially, it seems they were more about keeping records, making sure the logistical, administrative side of things was in order, right?
Exactly. They were more like overseers or treasurers of the club rather than spiritual monarchs. It was only later that these roles evolved into the kind of spiritual authority we now associate with bishops.
So it's like a transformation over time. Initially, these roles were very practical and mundane, and then gradually they acquired a deeper, more sacred meaning.
Yeah, and that gradual shift is pretty fascinating. At first, leadership was about keeping things running and maintaining order in these small groups. But by the turn of the second century, with figures like Ignatius of Antioch, the role of bishop started to be seen as a divine representative.
I gotta say, though, isn't there a bit of an oversimplification here? I mean, could it really be that early church leadership was just like a rebranding of everyday roles?
That's a great point, but it seems the evidence, like inscriptions and charters, really does point in that direction. It shows that the early Christian structures took on a lot of traits from the common Roman associations. It doesn't,
Mm,
completely erase the unique spiritual message, though.
exactly. Their message, the promise of resurrection and eternal life, was what really set them apart, not their organizational structure.
Right. It's the content, the story behind the club, that made Christianity revolutionary. All these ordinary meetings suddenly carried the promise of salvation and a reshaped sense of community.
Yes, and that inclusivity is striking. The idea that genders, classes, and ethnicities could mix, like, without the usual social barriers, was pretty radical for that time.
Yes, absolutely. While other groups were tied to specific professions or neighborhoods, the early Christian gatherings welcomed everyone. Jew and Greek, slave and free, men and women, all dining together at a common table.
It's almost like their communal meal wasn't just food. It was a symbol of breaking down societal barriers.
Exactly. They were redefining what it meant to belong. And that redefinition gave these small associations a surprising resilience. even in a society obsessed with class and status.
Right. And it's this blend of ordinary organizational structure and a radically inclusive message that helped Christianity to endure and grow, even when it was just a patchwork of small clubs scattered through cities like Rome.
Yeah, each little group had its own deacon, elder, and bishop, but there wasn't one central dominant institution at the start, just a multitude of micro-associations.
Definitely. And it's interesting to see how that multiplicity, those microclubs, eventually coalesced into a worldwide movement that reshaped history. Kind of like how small, regular teams in sports can rise to become champions when their true potential is recognized.
Absolutely. It's like, you have these everyday gatherings that, through a compelling narrative and a promise that goes beyond the ordinary, manage to turn into something, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
extraordinary.
I love that analogy. It's like the underdog story of history. Just regular people around one table, with a revolutionary promise, creating something that would outlast a mighty empire.
Right, it's impressive. And think about the symbolism. A bishop starting out as an overseer of meals, then slowly being reimagined as a keeper of divine truth. That transformation, it's kind of like upgrading your phone from a basic model to a smart, all-knowing assistant over time.
Haha, yeah, that's a fun way to put it. But it's seriously intriguing how, even in the early days, the limited size of these gatherings forced an intimacy that later evolved into a strong sense of community.
Absolutely, man. And this intimacy is, what made the church's story so compelling. It wasn't about, grandiosity at first, but about a genuine practical reimagining of social bonds.
Right. And while the structure was ordinary, the promise of eternal life and a personal connection with the divine was anything but ordinary. That juxtaposition is, really what makes it shocking.
Yeah, it really is startling. It turns the whole idea of a sacred institution on its head, proving that sometimes the extraordinary is hidden in plain sight within the mundane.
Exactly. And it also challenges our modern perceptions about church history. We often think of it as something set apart from everyday life, but this really shows that the roots were, deeply embedded in common Roman culture.
Right? The church wasn't born in a vacuum. It was very much a part of its time, modeled on familiar systems, but with a twist in the story it told. That twist was what gave it explosive power over time.
I think it's remarkable how this history, even if it might challenge some of our preconceived notions, helps us understand the adaptability and resilience of the early Christians.
Exactly. It's a story of evolution, from a humble association to a movement that, eventually reshaped the world. And it's a reminder that sometimes big changes come from, the smallest of gatherings.
Yeah, right. Totally. It definitely makes you rethink what sacred really means. When you strip away the grand architecture and focus on the human element, you see that it was all about community, shared purpose, and the courage to be different.
Absolutely. And that courage, that shared sense of purpose, and the promise of something beyond the here and now is what ultimately transformed these clubs into a lasting legacy.
Yep, indeed. Well, this definitely leaves us with a lot to think about. How ordinary beginnings can lead to, extraordinary outcomes.
Exactly. A reminder that history is full of surprises, and sometimes the most revolutionary ideas come dressed in the everyday clothes of society.
Right. Thanks for this deep dive. It's been a fascinating look at how the early church really started out.
Anytime. Keep challenging and questioning. It's the way we keep history alive and relatable.
Absolutely.